After the very colorful presentation about the cat tender community, I would like to present my research. I conducted my research approximately at the same time, and I was not looking for the existence of these communities, but I actually tried to establish how these communities could create certain effects, and I used the visual anthropology methods and used photos and similar. I will speak about the borders and fences, about the coexistence of the new and the old, and about the ruins and new buildings. I will touch upon a house as a continuation of people living in there and the creation of the attachment. So the first observation about this district was there are these big yards where the new and the old buildings continue to coexist. Maybe it's not so visible here. Maybe we need an aerial photo. What you saw maybe in the first slide, you could see these yards with houses, with new houses indicated. So both of them use the same territory, but this territory has been separated by building these new houses in the yards of the old houses. And the division between these two types of buildings is that the new buildings become the centers of this area, while the old buildings are more in the periphery. So what is in the center is always in the center of attention, and that affects the rest of the division, and as well as practical possibilities like moving around the yard. And I believe that an idea of Mircea Eliot that the holy is always and the immortality is always in the center, and I think that could be attributed to this situation as well. And in this case, the new is in the center. The new buildings, in a way, like eat away the old buildings from inside, because both of them continue to exist at the same time. But at the same time, the old buildings are deprived of something, because until the building of the new houses, the construction of the new houses, they had the yard to themselves. Of course, we still have to discuss how these things are used now, whether these yards were used to the fullest extent possible. But I have to say that these buildings with gray walls and shabby doors, they lose their dominating position, and their existence is endangered and questioned because they are pushed out from their initial territory. Also, when we look at these buildings visually, there is a impression that the old will fall apart and will leave, and the new buildings will continue to exist, and it's like an occupation from inside. That appealed to the argumentation about the necessity for the modern and the new, and at the same time these buildings occupy the space that is still relatively free. Also, various borders, fences escalate the situation that can be observed throughout this territory. They enclose the newly built, they also perform the protection function, but at the same time they escalate the tensions, and in a way they escalate the danger, the sense of danger in these areas, because they give an impression that something has to be guarded, and other groups, for some groups, well, the other groups are pushed out from this territory. There is also a lot of linguistic information. For example, there is a note or a sign, please do not park your car here, is often complemented by something like don't even try. So that can escalate the tensions. Speaking about the coexistence of the new and the old, I would like to indicate that there are quite many ruins in the district. So we have this bright and new, but at the same time there is quite a lot of falling apart, like in the pathways and the houses and the buildings. Here I would like to refer to Dylan Prix, who directs our attention towards the space and time with regards to the ruins, because there are many layers, like the renovation of the ruins, but if they are placed alongside the new, then they create a certain ambiguity as to their relationship, because it seems that these ruins do not belong to the present. They are an allegory of a different age, and thus they are perceived as something that do not belong together with the new, something that should be changed and transformed. Now about how the house and the building could be considered as a continuation of a person, like a space where this person resides. It's very difficult to create a divide between one body and the other body. The same refers to architecture and its structure. It's a part of the social fabric, and vice versa. Thinking about possibilities and creativity and how people transform what they have, including the balconies, the decorations, flower beds, cats, housing for cats, renovation of benches, with very creative approaches. I would say this can be perceived as their expression, and it's a testimony of whether they are ready to be involved in the creation of their space or not. Again, in the case of Pursiems, we have to speak about the new and the old, because the old buildings are constructed in the yard as a system in itself. They have a common lawns, they have terraces, so there is less need for them to participate in the creation of the space around them, while the inhabitants of the older buildings are quite active in the creation of their space. Of course, we can discuss their aesthetic preferences, but they still are quite active. This is a positive aspect, because they create what they need from a chaos that is around them. I have to say that this territory has a lot of potential, as well as a lot of potential risk, because of the unclear borders and vast areas that are not used for buildings, because many yards were newly built, already stand. There are places where there is a place for some more buildings. So then there is a question of what will come next. The borders are flexible, so we have this freedom, this flexibility, possibility for creation. At the same time, it results in, it creates a certain risks and certain danger. The Soviet buildings were built as modern buildings that met the requirements, the needs of the time. But when we analyze the ads where people want to sell their properties, also conducted interviews, and people had similar reasons why they want to live in this area, because it's close to the center, because there's greenery, the forest is close by. So inhabitants of the new and the old buildings had similar reasons. So we can assume that these buildings were actually, both types of buildings were built with a rational, similar goal. But at the same time, it has to be considered that each and every new space either is created at the expense of the older space, or finding a gap. So the houses that are or buildings that are gradually falling apart are actually freeing the space for the new buildings, and this is maybe a natural process, but we still have to consider the consequences of this kind of introduction and how the new and the old coexist. And by this, I would like to finish. Thank you.